Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What's the scariest non-supernatural thing that's ever happened to you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Was working as a lineman, tasked to replace a 16-meter wooden power pole, which requires climbing up to untie the lines from the isolators. I checked if the pole has had any rot beforehand, climbed up, untied the lines, climbed down. As I was packing my tools up, the pole fell from its own. Seeing my younger sister get punched in the face by a much bigger girl during an armed robbery at our hotel room when she was 19. She took it like a champ, but it was definitely a scary event for both me and her. The ballistic missile alert in Hawaii of 2018. We legitimately thought we were going to die, but played it cool in front of the kids so they wouldn't panic. Drove to the windward site because we figured they'd be aiming for Pearl Harbor Hickam, and a mountain between us would do the trick, and if it didn't, at least we'd die looking at something beautiful. When this happened, it was easy for a lot of us on the mainland to just kind of laugh and be like, that's stupid. But I could only imagine the absolute horror that the people in Hawaii felt during that. Huddling up in my brother's room as a 5 or 6-year-old, making our plan to get my mom's boyfriend to stop beating her in the living room. My brother was maybe 8 or 9. Okay, you go run to the phone and call 911, and I'll go out there with the hockey stick and hit him. I don't remember much else after that, just us both running out there with our hockey sticks and our plan ultimately working for the night. He was arrested, but was back the next day. I know the sequence of events happens more than once, and my job was always to run into the kitchen to call 911. Obviously, back when we had to reply on the house phone, because I could crouch and remain mostly unseen behind the counter since I was so young. Just going out there and seeing my strong, wonderful mom so vulnerable on the floor, and the look on her face, terrifying, being so scared for both your mom and yourself. I almost choked to death on Skittles when I was a kid. I shared this before, but when I was like 11 years old, I was home alone one day during the summer just watching TV while eating Skittles. I like to put a bunch in my mouth and make like a Skittle ball that I would chew on. Something on the show I was watching made me laugh, and I swallowed the ball, which got lodged in my throat. I then experienced a few seconds of sheer terror because I realized that there was nobody here to help me at all, and I was probably gonna die. Thankfully, I remembered some cartoon or movie where someone jammed their stomach on a chair and got something unstuck from their throat. So I lunged at the corner of the recliner as hard as I could with my stomach, and it actually worked, and popped the small ball out. It was super lucky because I really had no idea what I was doing, but one of the worst feelings I've ever experienced. Definitely never ate Skittles that way again after that, and to this day, I'm still a bit paranoid about eating certain things when alone. A man claiming to be a meter reader was in our yard and tried the back door after trying the front. It was unlocked because there was a field behind us and our gate had a lock that he somehow got by. The meter reader man was nearly eaten by our Great Dane, who was dumb and peaceful, except for when she laid eyes on him. Our other dog also wanted to kill him, and he was up on the trampoline begging us to call the dogs off, which we, my then 11-year-old sister and I, refused to do and went to get our dad, who worked from home. The guy escaped while we got our dad, and my dad let the police know what happened. The real meter reader man came the next week. Being on the phone to my partner and hearing her be in a car accident, longest few minutes of my life. She was picking me up and was about a minute away when she called to see where I was. She was waiting at an intersection, and when the traffic light went green, traveling straight, and was T-boned by someone in a truck. I don't think I've ever run so fast in my life. Fortunately, they hit the passenger side, and there was no oncoming traffic at the time. When I got there, the other driver was at her door and trying to open it to get her out. He probably had good intentions and was trying to help, but I gave him a serve. She was only scratched up in the end, but I've never seen her look so small and frightened. Look before you cross an intersection, everyone, even if the light is green. As a kid, I rode my bike home from school. Just as school got out, it was raining lightly. I got about 50 yards down the sidewalk when a sudden bolt of lightning exploded in the soccer field to my right, about 40 yards away. Then I saw 2 girls lying down in the grass. I actually thought they were joking at first, but no one was laughing and they weren't moving. Getting a better grasp of the situation, I turned around and huddled under the overhang of the school. I stood there and watched as a PE teacher did CPR and eventually ambulances came. They were taken away and there I was, just left waiting, scared to ride my bike home lest some bolt jump down and kill me. But my parents were both at work and more than an hour away, so I just mustered up the courage and rode home about 2 miles without any further incident. Both girls survived and eventually returned to school. I still have more than a healthy respect for lightning and don't particularly care to be outside at all if it's occurring. I was home alone when someone knocks on the door. I ask who it is because I don't answer the door for strangers. There's no reply. There's another knock. I ask who it is again, and again I get no reply. I must say that I lived in a high-crime area and don't own any weapons meant for self-defense, not even a good pair of muscles or fighting know-how. Suddenly, they start jiggling the door handle. Now I'm screaming, "Who is it?" I give an exaggerated, "Who is it?" Then the door swings open with force, and my sister comes in saying, "It's me." I've yet to live that down. Reading bedtime to kids, hear loud jet engine sounds, lots of them, live near US Air Force Base, sounded like a whole base took off at once. I thought, this is it, World War III is here, somebody's attacking North Korea, China, Russia, maybe everyone. Held kids close and tight, told them it was planes, didn't go further as I won't lie to them, just tried to reassure them. Turns out, someone had stolen a plane and was flying around. Air Force Base scrambled a lot of aircraft. Scared me good. My sister has mental health issues. We were in a foreign country, driving across mountains on a one-lane dirt road with no guardrails. She had a complete mental breakdown and threatened many times to drive off the edge. To this day, my mom swears my sister wouldn't have done it. All I say is, you weren't in the car. You have no idea. I was 14, alone at my grandma's house around midnight. She was across the street at the bar she owned. I was playing games on her computer about 15 feet from one of the windows facing the backyard. All of a sudden, the glass from the window shatters, and I ran to one of the bedrooms. I can hear my name being called. Eventually, I see my grandma's ex-boyfriend enter the living room where the computer is. He keeps saying my name. I'm scared shitless, but I walk out and confront him. He says my grandma stole his ID, and that's what he came for, as he's taking money from my grandma's purse. He looks effed up on something. I would later learn he liked to smoke crack. I forget how he leaves, but when he does, I call the bar, and people come over looking for him. They didn't find him. About a year later, he did it again, and I was once again alone there. Except this time, instead of breaking a window, he decides to try to kick the side door in. I'm just there, chilling, when out of nowhere, I hear the loudest bangs coming from the side of the house, and I instantly knew what was happening. I immediately called the bar, and they sent a bunch of people over before he could make it in. He apparently tried to jump from one of her sheds into an alley to the next house and broke his leg. He went to prison. I was standing in my kitchen talking with my dad, and suddenly we hear the very loud sound of breaking glass. We went outside and walked around the house looking for broken windows, etc. Found nothing. The next morning I was getting breakfast, and I opened the kitchen cupboard, and glass just poured out onto the counter and was all over the floor. TL, DR. Every glass in my cupboard shattered simultaneously while my father and I were in the room. We used to DJ at a small, intimate bar club in Johannesburg in the 90s, and there was a residential block of flats above the bar. It was my friend's 21st, and we were all outside having a laugh and smoking some hash, etc. Our one friend Pete, who drank peach schnapps by the bottle, shouted from above, and we looked up and he was on the roof of this 5-story building, standing on the edge with a glass full of schnapps, and he slipped and fell onto a wall on his hip. We watched his whole body fall and snap on that wall. That sound still haunts me 25 years later. What freaked us out is the fact that his glass landed and didn't break. He was in a coma for a while, and then we got told he would be paralyzed for life, and somehow he pulled through and was partially paralyzed on his left side of his body, and he still drank and partied like he did before, and he has full use of his body nowadays. I've not touched peach schnapps since. Pete, for the record, is alive and well and still likes his drink. He told us his dead Greek grandmother caught him in her hands to soften the blow. He stands firm with that statement, and we believe him. As a semi-retired bartender, let me give you some advice. Drinking peach schnapps straight will never end with a good result. Simple. My best friend had brought his friends from another neighborhood over to our street to play football. They were young gang members, and I didn't really like being around them, but I was cool with them. About 3 days later, they came back to our street, and I was just walking out of my apartment building by myself when two of them grabbed me, and the third kid pulled out a pocket knife and approached me with it and said, "Give me your sneakers and your chain," and pretended he was going to stab me. They all started laughing, and I started crying and ran inside, and they never came back around after that. Got the old fellow caught in a couple of gears at a job years ago. Cogs caught my shorts, took me into the machine, pulled back after I felt pressure, no pain, put my hands down the front of my shorts and pulled it back out. Hand was covered in blood. Ooh. Went into immediate shock and was rushed to hospital. Luckily, there was no significant amount of damage and just took some rest and healing. Probably scared me more than nearly dying from falling from a rather high height when I was a kid. Yeah. Hurrying up and trying to pack my things before my mom came home. I had broken down at school one day and told my principal the shit my mom had been doing to me for almost a decade. CAS was called, along with both my parents. My mom was notified first about what I said, and the principal didn't allow my dad to take me out of school until 4.5 hours later, when the school day actually ended. Going to my apartment and packing up my stuff was the most fear I'd ever experienced. Going down into the car park to see if my mom's sports car was there scared the crap out of me. Hurrying and grabbing any clothes and books I could find and stuffing them into a tote bag was nerve-wracking. Searching the entire house for my phone and meds made me feel like my mom was about to pop around a corner. I had a total nervous meltdown when my cat escaped from her carrier and went behind the couch, because I knew if my mom came home and saw my cat after being notified of what happened at school, I don't think my cat would have lasted long. The second my cat came back out of the couch, I grabbed her so quickly and bolted out of that apartment. Driving away from that apartment complex, I noticed every red sports car on the road, and every single one made me hold my breath. That day scared me so bad I couldn't stop trembling for days, and for weeks I was hallucinating that I was still in my old apartment, and whenever I saw my dad, I thought he was my mom. I was about 19, petite young blonde who looked even younger than I was. I was on a bus home after a night class. A man got on the bus and made eye contact with me, and my blood immediately went cold. I got off the bus and started walking home, and luckily checked behind me. The creepy man who had boarded the bus a few stops before had gotten off too, and he was staring directly at me. I had two routes home, through a short alley or across a large field. I darted through the alley and could hear him running behind me, so I jumped my neighbor's fence and hid behind their shed. I climbed a few more fences until I got to a neighbor I knew decently well and knocked on their back door, scaring the crap out of them. My neighbor walked me the rest of the way to my house, but I'm absolutely certain if I hadn't outrun that man, I wouldn't have survived. He had evil in his eyes. My uncle, who was always abusive to my mom and anyone else for that matter, coming to our home at 2 a.m. drunk and angry. He was throwing rocks at our house and tried to break down the gate. Cops were called and it went insane. He bit one of the cops' ears off, and by the time he had been subdued, he was naked and covered in blood. I remember seeing him like that, and he looked at me and told me he'd kill me. We don't see him again for 3 years, and when I finally did, he went from this muscled-up rage hound to this skin and bones living dead that could barely move. Years of drug and alcohol really effed him over. When he was lucid, he'd threaten everyone, but most of the time he would just watch TV. Last year I was driving home at around midnight. I turned left and a truck blew through the light doing at least 70. My light was green for at least 15 seconds, and I still had 5 seconds according to the walk sign, so how this asshole would have accidentally done this is beyond me. He missed me by inches. I never saw him coming. I just heard something since my windows were down and turned directly into the left lane, even though I needed to make a right really soon. Replaying it, I don't know why I didn't go to the right lane and how he didn't hit me. Anyway, since he was so close. My car is a small Honda, so if I took this collision, I wouldn't be alive. It still messes with me. Weirder still, 2 days later, I ended up getting into an actual accident for the first time in over 15 years. I wasn't at fault, but it's like the universe just had to smash my car. I'm glad it happened the way it did instead of the other way. It almost sounds as if that first incident was a premonition of something to come, or maybe you just live in a town with really bad drivers. Glad you're okay. There were actually 2 shooting incidents in my school just this year. Nothing actually happened, but I got pretty shaken up. I live in a small town, really nice place, super safe. I was outside at recess one day in school when our principal came over the loudspeaker. He made a vague announcement revolving around, "If you see something fishy, please tell us." Myself and my friends were already confused and kind of crept out. I got on my school bus this afternoon, where I mentioned it to my friend, a girl that I went to elementary school with, and a girl a year older than me. The girl a year older than me knew a hell of a lot more than we did. Basically, there was a girl in her grade who was planning to shoot up the school. Apparently, this girl was obviously not a good student and had shaved her head and shit. The girl on my bus also told her that apparently she was trying to get her to hands on a gun and even had a hit list. The other incident may not have actually been real, I just heard it from a friend. But apparently, there was a guy that's a year older than me that was rumored to have been showing off a gun to some friends in school. He was also rumored to have been spending time in the library trying to make plans for his route to shoot up the place, and he had to be monitored by undercover officers that were pretending to be teachers. They apparently found out via his older brother that he no longer had possession of said gun. It seems a little far-fetched, but either way. Thankfully, we have an officer constantly patrolling our school, well-prepared teachers and students, and a close police station. I recall my English teacher telling my class about a false alarm they had a while back where the police were able to get there in roughly 2 minutes. I've had several times that I've inexplicably survived things that ought to have killed me. For example, as a teen, I was riding my bike on the main road through town when I was hit by a car from behind. I remember the screech of the tires and the initial impact, but I have no recollection how I landed on my feet, unhurt, behind the car. The driver jumped out in hysterics. My bike was crushed, and I was just standing there behind the car thinking, what the hell just happened? I fell from a balcony between 2nd and 3rd floors once, same deal. I remember starting to fall, and I remember standing on the ground thinking, what the F? Completely unscathed. I think I might get a rush of adrenaline and black out in those situations, and somehow land on my feet.